This is a video presentation designed to support whole staff delivery at the beginning of the academic year. It is recommended that you afford about 2.5 hours and to factor in breaks. You can break up this training into different modules or objectives. Details of different times are in the video description. This is a training agreement that is standard for any safeguarding training. Child abuse can be distressing and a sensitive issue. Please ensure that you look after yourself and colleagues if you are affected by the training. Confidentiality. When you are having discussions during the training, do consider anonymizing who you are referring to. There may be information that you are privy to that others are not. Respect each other's views. We all have different values, experiences, backgrounds, and beliefs. Do use this session as a safe space to explore what this looks like from different perspectives. Please switch your phones to silent if you haven't already done so. There will be times in the training where you are encouraged to use your smartphone. However, please can you respect the facilitator and colleagues by not being distracted with your devices. Timekeeping. This will vary depending on your context, but if this is a facilitated session, please respect the facilitator around arranged times. Please do ask questions. No question is a silly one. Hopefully your designated safeguarding lead or a member of the safeguarding team is present. If they don't know the answer, they can always contact the Bristol Safeguarding and Education team. The aims of the training are for you to refresh your safeguarding knowledge, provide you with updates on key changes in the field of safeguarding, and for you to be able to apply these in the context of your day-to-day work. Objectives. Refresh knowledge. This is on the assumption that many of you have already completed safeguarding awareness training and that this will be a reminder of key points, but also contextually relevant to practice during the pandemic. We will cover a recap on definitions, working together to identify vulnerability and provide early help, and the role of the designated safeguarding lead. These will all be integrating updates from the statutory guidance Keeping Children Safe in Education 2021, which will be effective from September. Topical issues. These mirror key areas of safeguarding which reflect local and national priorities. These are sexual abuse and sexual harassment between peers and online safety. And last but not least, safer working practice. This will include a refresher, what low-level concerns are and what to do, and self-care. This training is designed to be a refresher, not to teach you the basics of safeguarding. If you feel that you do need additional training, or that you might have missed or not undertaken safeguarding awareness training, please speak to your designated safeguarding lead to arrange a catch-up or access a course. This section will integrate updates from Keeping Children Safe in Education 2021. The session will hopefully grow your knowledge and skills and lift the words up off the page and into practice. Please note, for those of you who work directly with children, you will all need to read the new version of Part 1 and Annex B. And for those of you who don't work directly with children, you now have the option of reading Annex A instead. Safeguarding. You already do this all of the time. Now is your time to show how you do it. Does anyone want to give a rendition of Montel Williams' This Is How We Do It? Sadly, I'm not there to check if anyone did do it, but thumbs up to those who gave it a good go. Most of you have had the definition drummed into you every year since you've worked in your roles. To help you reflect and refresh, can you give specific examples of what each point has looked like for us during the pandemic? Protecting children from maltreatment. Preventing impairment of children's health or development. Remember, this was amended last year to now include preventing impairment of children's mental and physical health or development. Ensuring that children grow up in circumstances consistent with the provision of safe and effective care. Taking action to enable all children to have the best outcomes. Have a think. Can you give examples of any of these and what this has looked like during the pandemic in your setting or in your role? Pause the video for your discussion. Child protection. Can anyone remember what the difference between safeguarding and child protection is? Pause the video to allow for discussion. Here is a clue. This is Bristol's Local Safeguarding Partnerships Continuum of Needs from the Local Threshold document. In the green, you have universal services. These are services that all children and young people and families can access. Their needs are able to be met by services at this threshold and they are thriving. In the yellow, you have Universal Plus. This is where children, young people and their families who have additional unmet needs are just coping. They may be in need of early help and support from services. In the orange, you have targeted support. This is where children, young people and their families are struggling to cope and need a coordinated multi-agency targeted response. And the red section represents specialist services. This is where children, young people and their families are not coping and are likely to need a statutory response. Child protection is a legal threshold under Section 47 of the Children Act 1989, by which action must be taken when a child is identified to be suffering or likely to suffer significant harm. This normally happens in the red specialist service area, whereby a response is required from statutory agencies such as Children's Social Care, the police, and health. The role of the designated safeguarding leads and their deputies. Historically, they were known as child protection officers. However, child protection officer does not reflect the role nor the different thresholds of activity that goes on. As we have discussed, the width of what is considered safeguarding is about protection, prevention, providing effective care, and being able to support learners to achieve best outcomes, not just responding to incidents of significant harm. The role of the designated safeguarding lead is outlined in statutory guidance keeping children safe in education. Previous versions have broadly summarised the role to the following: managing referrals externally and internally, working with others, acting as a point of contact for external agencies and internally, overseeing training and raising awareness of safeguarding issues, carrying out casework, promoting educational outcomes for those learners, and sharing information with other agencies and settings when required. A national review of children in need concluded in 2019. There was recognition that there needs to be improvements of the educational outcomes of children who have needed, have, or have previously had a social worker. The review's conclusion commits us to taking action across 4 areas. Increase visibility and recognition of this cohort, so we can identify and take action much earlier and provide earlier help and support. Keeping children in education, to prevent the likelihood of them developing poor attendance or being excluded or suspended. To ensure that we raise and maintain high aspirations for this cohort, we need to make reasonable adjustments for children who have additional vulnerabilities. And to ensure children receive effective, evidence-based support. This is something we already do for children in care, but do we extend our remit to other vulnerable children? To reflect this, keeping children safe in education has extended the role of the DSL to now include liaising with staff with a range of different responsibilities, such as the SENCO, teachers, pastoral support, behaviour and attendance leads, to ensure safeguarding welfare and educational outcomes are linked. Holistic support should be considered which meets the needs of the learner. For example, you may be considering excluding a child for breaching the behaviour policy, but they may be demonstrating trauma through their behaviour as the child may be experiencing and witnessing domestic abuse at home. Academic, inclusion and pastoral support should be complementing each other. For this to happen, staff need to work with each other and not in isolation. The designated safeguarding lead should take lead responsibility for promoting educational outcomes for the cohort of vulnerable learners, which should include working with the head teacher and other relevant strategic leads within the setting. Often work around this can happen in silos, particularly if the child has an educational health and care plan. The DSL and safeguarding team should work together with internal colleagues to coordinate support for that child. We have had serious incidents in Bristol this year where colleagues were not liaising with each other. For example, a child with known poor attendance was accessing alternative provisions and was also getting involved in crime and criminal exploitation. Understanding the views of children. The designated safeguarding lead should encourage and create a culture of listening to children and taking into account their wishes and feelings amongst all staff and in any measures the school or college may put in place to protect them. This should include understanding the difficulties that children may have in approaching staff about their circumstances and consider how to build trusting relationships which facilitates communication. Holding and sharing information. Designated safeguarding leads have the responsibility to transfer child protection files to support transitions and children's outcomes when they move to a new setting. This will help children with proactive support identified set up to thrive rather than setting them up to fail or to have them struggle in their new provision. Designated safeguarding leads cannot do this on their own. Remember, safeguarding is everybody's responsibility. This next exercise will hopefully help you think about how you can play your part in working together to promote educational outcomes for vulnerable learners. Right, now to get you moving and your blood pumping. In the style of Beyoncé, single ladies, please put your hand up if the following statements apply to you. So, we're after the movement, not a disclosure of your relationship status. Exemptions can be made if you've got carpal tunnel syndrome. Does anyone want to demonstrate? Are we ready? Put your hands up if any of the following apply to you. Do you in your role help promote attendance? Do you in your role help promote positive behaviour? Do you in your role work with or help promote educational outcomes for those with special educational needs? Do you in your role help promote attainment? Hopefully most, if not all of you, were releasing your inner divas. All of this contributes towards safeguarding of vulnerable learners, and we all have an active role to play. Now let's look at some of the statistical data for outcomes for children with social workers last year. 12.5% persistent absenteeism for children in care. A pupil was identified as being persistently absent if they missed 10% or more of their possible sessions. This figure is higher for children in care than any other vulnerable children cohorts. 50.2% of children in need are pupils with free school meals eligibility. This compares to the general population where only 17% are eligible. Think about poverty more widely. What is it and how do we assess it? How has it impacted on children and young people during the coronavirus period, where actually children experienced digital poverty, particularly highlighted during the pandemic? What do you think the impact was? 48.3% of children in need are pupils with special educational needs. Pupils in social care groups are much more likely to have special educational needs compared to the 15% represented in the overall pupil population. How do you think safeguarding and special educational needs systems are interlinked? Think about the role of the designated safeguarding lead and the special educational needs coordinator. How do they collaborate? 21.1 was the average attainment 8 score for pupils who are child in need. As in previous years, the average attainment 8 scores in 2020 for all of the key social care groups were less than half of that compared to the overall pupil population. Bear in mind how these statistics made you feel. Now we need you to participate again. Put your hands up, and no need for Beyoncé stars this time, if you can contribute towards the following statements. I know who the cohort of children who have or who have had a social worker are. I understand their academic progress and attainment. Some of you might be wondering why we're including those who have had a social worker. This is in recognition that even when statutory social care interventions has ended, there's still a lasting impact on the child's educational outcomes. Of those of you who put your hands up, how can you contribute towards the understanding of their academic progress and attainment? Pause the video for a discussion. Okay, please pop your hands up again if you think the next statement applies to you. I provide additional academic support or reasonable adjustments to help children who have or who have had a social worker to reach their full potential. Again, if you put your hand up, how can you contribute? Pause the video for a discussion. For those of you who weren't quite sure what to do, this doesn't have to be complicated. It's not rocket science. This is a video produced by Unique Voice, commissioned by the Keeping Bristol Safe Partnership. You may recognise some of the local landmarks in East Central Bristol. Whilst you're watching it, have a think about what you can do yourself.
Come on, we're late again. This is like the third time this week. What time do you call it? Just get inside.
Where on earth have you been? You're 20 minutes late, Joe. Sit down quickly. We need to make sure we've got our goggles, gloves, all the health and safety. Joe, will you pay attention? Sorry, this attitude is not good enough. Out you go. Out. Go and see Mr. Turner, please. I've had enough. Right. As I say.
Right.
No, come on. No, wait there a sec. Come in, Mel. We spoke about this last week. You can't come in again, man. Just go home.
Alright, bless up, innit?
Hi Joe, is that you again?
Joe, get up. Get up. Out. Out you go. Get up.
This is as simple as being
Hi,
nice in
you
the
late
morning.
again? Everything
greeting the
okay?
child before you tell them off,
Come and see me
before
if
they
you
even
need
sat
to.
down. We have already discussed the need to work together internally and the importance of the role that education settings play in safeguarding learners. Working together with other agencies is a key concept in successful safeguarding, and we have a legal duty to do this. The local safeguarding partnership ensures that we work together with other statutory partners such as social care, health, and the police. After all, education settings cannot solve society's issues on their own, nor always keep children safe on their own or in isolation, particularly if harm occurs outside of the school context. Sometimes you need to look beyond our statutory partners for effective safeguarding. Here are some other groups who may be involved in keeping children and young people safe. Have a look at this list and then have a discussion around how you think they safeguard learners. We have parents and carers, siblings and other family members, peers, pre or after school club staff, detached youth workers, sports coaches, activity leaders, members of the community, and local business owners. Pause the video to have a discussion. Here is a snapshot of serious incidents in Bristol that occurred in the last calendar year. The number of stabbings and incidents of serious youth violence involved with bladed weapons for 2020 to 21 is as follows. There were 25 occurrences involving young people aged between 16 to 25 years old, and 7 incidents involving children aged between 10 and 15 years old. In this calendar year alone, in Bristol there have been 3 rapid reviews where stabbing has been cited as the cause of harm. Rapid reviews are statutory. This is where the local safeguarding partnerships are required to undertake learning to determine whether a full child safeguarding practice review should take place. The threshold for this is serious harm, which is the serious and/or long-term impairment of a child's mental health or intellectual, emotional, social, or behavioural development and/or physical health. Disproportionately, children and young people involved have had protected characteristics, that they were Black, Asian, minority ethnic backgrounds and/or have had special educational needs and disabilities and attend alternative learning provisions. Black, Asian, minority ethnic children with special educational needs are overrepresented in this cohort. Is this surprising? How does it make you feel? Why do you think this may be? What do you think you can do in your practice to promote the inclusion and equality of learners in your setting? And how is that underpinned by your policies? Pause the video to have a discussion. We're going to explore this further with the next exercise. Is this SEN or safeguarding? Jaden is 10. He's joined your school this academic year. You have a good relationship with Jaden, but despite adjusting your resources for English and maths lessons, you are often finding Jaden says he does not get it, and either will not start or complete the work. In some topics, such as history, Jaden shows real interest and makes a lot of verbal contributions to the lessons. Jaden has a diagnosis of ADHD. Recently, in English and maths, Jaden has not completed work and has become more talkative. You have found yourself increasingly referring to classroom expectations. Jaden has also arrived late to school several times in the last few weeks. You are aware that Jaden spent a lot of time outside of class last year due to behavioural issues. Pause the video and take some time to discuss the following questions. Do you have any worries? And what would you do in this instance? Now, jump forward to 2 years later. Jaden's attendance at school has sharply declined. When he was attending, he received 2 fixed-term exclusions for swearing at members of staff. Jaden has gone missing overnight 3 times in 3 months, once being found in Weston-super-Mare, and his parents have reported that he started to smoke cannabis regularly. Pause the video for further discussion to answer the following questions. What has changed? And in hindsight, would you have done anything different to what you have suggested before? And what would early help look like for Jaden? So here are some thoughts for you to take away with you. Thrive, not just survive. It's not just about settling for safe. We don't wake up in the morning to have low expectations for our children and young people that we work with. We take action to enable all children to have the best outcomes. Inclusion isn't just about ticking an inequalities box. Belonging involves centering the voices of those who experience institutional barriers, such as those with protected characteristics. Value their often different experiences if they don't fit our perceived norms. Long-term outcomes, not just short-term interventions. What you do today doesn't just last whilst the child or young person is at your setting. Set your goals further into the future for the child's adolescence and adulthood. Do with, not do to. Otherwise, you risk becoming led by the system's needs rather than being child-focused. It is quite easy to think that we know best and it'll be quicker to lead, but this does run the risk of becoming oppressive, and be really mindful of your perceived professional power. You may have the best of intentions, but often it can lead to disempowerment for the child and family. Don't work in silos. Working together and being on the same team means that you can avoid letting children and learners fall through the metaphorical gaps. Also, working together means a problem shared is a problem halved. The screen just summarises other updates from Keeping Children Safe in Education 2021. The points in red will be covered by the rest of the training. For a more in-depth look into the changes, please check out our Keeping Children Safe in Education briefing video hyperlinked in the description. Right, it's time for a break. Pause the video until it's time to come back. Welcome back. This next section will be focusing on topical issues such as peer-on-peer abuse, particularly harmful sexual behaviour, and online safety. Due to the national updates and the need to recognise that this can happen here, I want you to be thinking about how this resonates with you as a setting. How well can you identify peer-on-peer abuse? Take 5 to 10 minutes to do the following. 1. Come up with as many examples of peer-on-peer abuse as you can. 2. Answer, which school policies should we refer to when we're looking for procedures to deal with peer-on-peer abuse? And 3. What is everyone's invited? Pause the video to give time for discussion. Here are a few examples which have already been established in historical versions of Keeping Children Safe in Education. Bullying, including cyberbullying, prejudice-based and discriminatory bullying. Physical abuse such as hitting, kicking, shaking, biting, hair pulling, or otherwise causing physical harm. This may include an online element which facilitates, threatens, or encourages physical abuse. And initiation, hazing type violence and rituals. This could include activities involving harassment, abuse, or humiliation used as ways of initiating a person into a group and may also include an online element. There have also been more additions and amendments in relation to some of the forms of peer-on-peer abuse that involve a sexual nature. Abuse in intimate personal relationships between peers. This has been added to highlight that even when children and young people appear to be in consenting relationships, sexual violence and harassment can still occur. Sexual violence such as rape, assault by penetration, and sexual assault. This may include an online element which facilitates, threatens, and/or encourages sexual violence. Note that this isn't limited to the act itself, but the threat of. This is still potentially a criminal act, and therefore action should be taken to prevent it. Upskirting. This typically involves taking a picture under a person's clothing without their permission, with the intention of viewing their genitals or buttocks to obtain sexual gratification or cause the victim humiliation, distress, or alarm. Sexual harassment, such as sexual comments, remarks, jokes, and online sexual harassment, which may be standalone or part of a broader pattern of abuse. Causing someone to engage in sexual activity without consent, such as forcing someone to strip, touch themselves sexually, or to engage in sexual activity with a third party. Consensual and non-consensual sharing of nudes or semi-nude images or videos, also known as sexting or youth-produced sexual imagery. So what did you come up in terms of answers for which school policy should we refer to when looking for procedures? Pause the video for feedback. Historically and traditionally, this has been covered by the settings behaviour policy. This has led to punitive and ineffective interventions being promoted, with the definition of safeguarding being updated to include the preventing the impairment of children's mental and physical health or development. It seems obvious that this should be considered under the safeguarding policy. With national developments in relation to the exposure of the extent of peer-on-peer abuse, Keeping Children Safe in Education has updated the following in Part 1, which you all should read, to ensure that the clarity that peer-on-peer harm should be considered primarily as a safeguarding issue to consider the welfare and the safety of children first, but this should be read in conjunction with the behaviour policy. So, this is what it says. The safeguarding and child protection policy should include the policy and procedures to deal or respond with peer-on-peer abuse. The behaviour policy, on the other hand, should include measures to prevent bullying, including cyberbullying, prejudice-based and discriminatory bullying. Have a think about what this means in practice. Make sure you report and record concerns in the same manner that you would do for a safeguarding or child protection issue via CPOMs or whatever your processes are for reporting causes for concern to your designated safeguarding lead or the safeguarding team. So, what is Everyone's Invited? Pause the video for discussion. Everyone's Invited is a space created by Soma Sara in June 2020 for survivors to share their stories of sexual harassment and sexual abuse whilst they're in school or university. Since the 8th of March 2021, it has attracted over 51,000 testimonies from children, young people and adults about the harm they've experienced. The site has highlighted the prevalence of rape culture. Rape culture is when attitudes, behaviours and beliefs in society have the effect of normalising and trivialising sexual violence. This culture includes misogyny, rape jokes, sexual harassment, online sexual abuse, upskirting, non-consensual sharing of intimate photos, cyberflashing, and sexual coercion. When behaviours such as these are normalised, this can act as a gateway to more extreme acts such as sexual assault and rape. The response to Everyone's Invited has triggered the government to commission a national review of the extent of sexual abuse in schools and colleges by Ofsted. The review found that 90% of girls and nearly 50% of boys reported being sent explicit pictures or videos of things they did not want to see, stating it happens a lot to them or their peers. Sexual harassment occurs too frequently that it has become commonplace, so much so that children and young people do not see the point in reporting those incidents. 92% of girls and 74% of boys said that sexist name-calling happens a lot, or sometimes to them or their peers. The frequency of these harmful sexualized behaviors means that some children and young people consider them normal. A lot of this can happen outside of school, but experiences have happened on the school site, such as school corridors or at the other end of the playground. The report also found that staff and leaders underestimated the scale of the problems. They did not identify sexual harassment and sexualized language as problematic, or they were unaware that they were even happening. When it came to sexual violence, such as rape, sexual assault, and assault by penetration, it was noted that schools appeared to be able to identify and respond to these needs appropriately. So schools are able to identify and act with significant concerns, but less so with more subtle and more submersive instances of harassment, either online or face-to-face. Even when settings demonstrated a proactive whole-school approach to tackling sexual harassment and violence, there was a persistent underestimation of the prevalence of online sexualized abuse. The report recommended that settings should provide training to ensure that all staff and governors, where relevant, can better understand the definitions of sexual harassment and sexual violence, including online sexual abuse, identify earlier signs of peer-on-peer sexual abuse, and consistently uphold standards in respect to response to sexual harassment and online sexual abuse. Schools and colleges cannot tackle sexual harassment and sexual violence, including online, on their own, and neither should they. For example, the prevalence of children and young people seeing explicit materials they do not want to see and being pressured to send nudes is a much wider problem than schools can address. While they can play their part, it's not only their responsibility to solve it. So, have a think. What can we do though? We need to set out our basic expectations. Maintain an attitude that it can happen here. Act on the assumption that it is happening even if you don't have any reports. It may be that there are barriers to children and young people being able to report concerns. Either they've normalised the activity, they may not feel confident that they will be believed, or that they've had a negative experience of reporting it before and have lost confidence in adults. If an occurrence were to happen outside of school, it still needs acting upon. You may be the trusted adult in which the child may make a disclosure of harm to. You might not think you can take action, but you can work with other professionals who will be able to reach into those contexts beyond the school. Contextual safeguarding is an approach where interventions can take place to the context themselves rather than just focusing on the needs of the individual children. For example, better visibility and CCTV at the local dodgy park where activity is known to happen will not only keep your learner safe, but other children in the community. You must reassure victims that they're being taken seriously that you support them, and that you keep them safe. They should never be made to feel ashamed for making a report. Sometimes this can be unconscious. Do you think about your non-verbal communication when dealing with something uncomfortable? Do you have a leaky face, for instance, when you express your emotions quite readily when you hear something you don't like or you don't agree with? Challenge inappropriate behaviour between peers, as this can lead to a culture of unacceptable behaviours which normalise abuse. We risk normalising this behaviour when we pass it off as banter, that these kids are just having a laugh, or that this is part of growing up, or that this is a case of boys being boys. Right, it's time to reflect on practice and apply it to the context of what you have heard. Let's move beyond ticking boxes and think about how effective our work can be when working with children and young people. A zero tolerance approach. Keeping children safe in education refers that a zero tolerance approach to abuse should be adopted. But what does this actually mean to you? Barriers to reporting. Here are a few reasons why children and young people do not share their concerns. They are worried that what happens next will be out of their control. They are worried that they will be branded by their peers as a snitch who got a peer into trouble. They are worried that they will be ostracized from their friendship groups. With this in mind, how can you encourage children and young people to communicate their worries? Training facilitators. Either split the audience into groups and allocate them one of the questions to answer, or deal with both questions in succession. Take 5 to 10 minutes to discuss the question and get feedback. Pause the video for discussion time. Zero tolerance feedback. Zero tolerance approaches can limit the response by the organisations and reduces the capacity of leaders to understand what is behind behaviours. It can also lead to lazy practice, which ignores the context of the behaviour and the child's needs. This also reduces the flexibility of policies being applied for those with additional needs or those with additional vulnerabilities that might have protected characteristics, for instance. So what can you do? Do you think about how you can educate and take action to tackle the culture that normalizes abuse? How can you use RSHE, relationship, sex and health education, to support? Feedback for barriers to reporting. Children and young people are more likely to report their concerns to their peers. So consider how you can support children to support their friends. Consider how you can proactively tackle snitch cultures through the curriculum. Tackle and challenge staff who may reinforce the culture inadvertently, which is permissive of lower level concerns. Maybe have a think about, are your actual referral mechanisms truly anonymous? Do you have a listening culture? How do you use and respond to the student voice? Make sure you create and utilize safe and supported spaces for your learners. Build up and maintain those trusting relationships as safe adults. But equally have some empathy. Just think, what is it like talking to someone from a different generation about sex? We will be showing you Simon Hackett's Continuum of harmful sexualized behavior mapped onto the local safeguarding partnerships continuum of need. This is to ensure that proportionate approaches lead to welfare support for children who may be in need. Normal, age-appropriate behaviours, such as something that's developmentally expected, socially acceptable, consensual, mutual and reciprocal, and has elements of shared decision-making. These can generally be safely addressed at universal level, such as through the school curriculum, the ability to uphold your school values, and the behaviour policy. Despite the lower risk and these behaviours being perceived as developmentally normal, you still need to record and report concerns to the designated safeguarding lead or safeguarding team, who will provide a safeguarding yet proportionate response. Inappropriate behaviours. These may require interventions at universal plus level, such as targeted RSHE for an individual or a peer group. It could be providing one-to-one support for a child. It could also be providing parental advice and guidance. Examples of inappropriate behaviour can include single or isolated instances of inappropriate sexual behaviour, socially acceptable behaviour but within a peer group, which would ordinarily be done on your own. Context for behaviour may be inappropriate. They could be doing something publicly that would ordinarily be done in private, and there's a general consensual and reciprocal nature to this behaviour. Problematic. This is when concerns start to escalate. Normally, this can include a pattern of behaviour which is inappropriate. This normally is a communication of additional vulnerability or unmet needs which is more deep-rooted. This will often require services from a range of different professionals to support and is normally provided at a targeted support level. This being said, it might meet the threshold for statutory service support. Problematic and concerning behaviour which in its nature is not appropriate or normal and will lead you to worry. This behaviour is normally developmentally unusual and socially unexpected, something that's not expected for that age. Whilst there are no overt elements of victimisation, consent issues may be unclear, there may be a power differential. This behaviour may include levels of compulsivity. Abusive. This may certainly require an assessment of needs under statutory services under the Children Act 1989. These behaviours are not normal and may indicate that the child is experiencing or has experienced harm themselves. Typically, specialist services will be providing intervention and support at a statutory level. A child demonstrating abusive, harmful sexualized behavior may intend to victimize or target another child. This is often accompanied with a misuse of power, coercion, and force to ensure victim compliance. The behavior may reflect an intrusive act where force or power is exerted. There is a lack of informed consent, or that consent may not be freely given by the victim. This might be due to an age or developmental difference between the children and young people involved. This may include elements of expressive violence or the threat of violence. Violent, harmful sexual behaviours. These will likely reach a criminal threshold, but a well-thought approach should be taken. It is rare a child demonstrating sexual violence does not have unmet needs themselves, nor is likely to have experienced significant harm themselves. This will be guaranteed to be dealt with under statutory services and will require a child protection consideration. Statutory agencies will need to work together to ensure the child is not at risk themselves or pose a risk to others. Behaviours under this threshold can come under the categories of rape, assault by penetration, or sexual assault. This is characterized by physically violent sexual abuse, which is highly intrusive, which uses violence that is psychologically or sexually arousing to the perpetrator and may reflect an element of sadism, the enjoyment of the suffering or humiliation of others. It's really important that you understand the setting's response to peer-on-peer abuse. This next section will talk you through this. When you have identified an incident, you should support the child or children's immediate safety and well-being. Report concerns immediately to the designated safeguarding lead or safeguarding team. If you witness the incident, don't pass the buck. You may need to address the behaviour there and then. The designated safeguarding lead will then review information about that child and any other children involved with other members of the safeguarding team. They'll also screen or assess the severity of the situation using tools based on the previous slide. A good assessment should take into account the child's attendance, behaviour, whether they've got any special educational needs or disabilities, their attainment, and whether there's any contextual risks known. Depending on the outcome of this assessment or screening, this will lead to a proportionate response, either at the Universal or Universal Plus level where concerns can be dealt with as a setting. Maybe the needs are more complex and require input and intervention from additional agencies at a targeted support level. Agencies can include CAMS, school nurse, family support workers, or youth workers. High risk or need for statutory agencies will require referral to either social care and by proxy the police. This might reflect that the children or family involved are highly vulnerable and will need an assessment of need under the Children Act 1989. Regardless of the threshold or level of assessment, the child or children will still come to school. Designated safeguarding leads will need to consider creating safety plans or risk assessments. They'll need to monitor and review these plans at least every 3 months after each new occurrence and ensure that interventions take place in the context in which harm occurred, such as unsupervised corridors, toilets, blind parts of the playground, or peer groups. If you're happy and you know it, clap your hands. Okay, I suspect that was a tumbleweed moment. After making a fool of myself singing to the education workforce, I do wonder if any of you actually humoured me and actually clapped your hands. If you did, you get a thumbs up from me. But if you did get the pun through my atrocious singing and you still didn't clap your hands, is this an admission that you're not that tech savvy? Now you have the chance to redeem yourselves. What are the following? OnlyFans. Pause the video for a discussion. This is a website where people sell content that they have created to subscribers. However, during the pandemic, the site became popular for selling explicit and pornographic videos. Popular celebrities such as Love Island contestants endorsed OnlyFans on their social media sites, normalizing the selling of explicit content to their younger followers who may not consider the potential risks involved. OnlyFans is failing to prevent underage users from selling and appearing in explicit videos. This highlights the need for platforms to have better age verification, but to also counter the glamorization and commodification of explicit images. Creators have been the target of stalking, harassment, exploitation, and extortion. Does anyone know what Twitch is? Please pause the video for discussion. Twitch is the world's leading live streaming platform for gamers and other things we love. This popular online gaming streaming platform can expose children to extreme language or views. The platform is used for other live streaming events such as concerts, meet and greets, and fights. Whilst it may seem harmless, many of the games being played have violent content, such as Call of Duty, which has a rating of 18+. There is no child-friendly filter. Content that users can view isn't restricted based on the age of the account holder. Chat rooms run alongside live stream. Whilst it does have moderators, content can only be moderated after it's posted. Twitchers who stream also may use inappropriate language, which may be an issue, especially if younger kids are watching. Last one, who knows what a freemium is? Pause the video for a discussion. Freemium, a combination of the words free and premium. The term freemium is a type of business model that offers basic features to users at no cost and charges a premium for supplemental or advanced features. A company using a freemium model provides basic services for free, often in a free trial or a limited version for the user, while also offering more advanced services or additional features at a premium. For children and young people, most games and apps that they will access are freemiums, in that they are free to download. Many apps offer what is called in-app purchases, where you can buy access to more advanced features to progress the user's experience. Often over time, a free game will cost more if you regularly access in-app purchases than if you buy a game in the shop. This can be both addictive and costly, especially if you haven't disabled the setting on your child's device. Not all apps are bad. Here are a few apps to make you more appy. Another tumbleweed moment, no doubt. Now, if you think that my puns are bad and it's causing you emotional distress, maybe give one of these apps a go. These are all NHS approved and help children, young people, and not so young people develop positive mental health. You can scan the QR code to take you to the appropriate website. You may want to pause the video whilst you do this. Now, if, after all of that, you feel you need to brush up on your online safety skills and knowledge, we strongly recommend that you download the Safer Schools app. The Safer Schools app is completely free and will give you bite-sized nuggets of information whilst keeping you up to date with all the emerging online risks and trends. The platform has free online training around a variety of topics, not just online safety. If you were a colleague who wanted to brush up on your general safeguarding awareness knowledge, there is a free online course you can complete on your phone or device, and you get certificates for any completed course. You will also be able to link into local resources and news via the Bristol Safeguarding and Education website. You can download the app in 3 easy steps. Step 1. Scan the QR code or check your app store for the Safer Schools app. Once you've downloaded the app, you can move on to step 2. choosing the right account. Your setting may already have access to the app. That's great if you already have got access to it, but if you or your setting doesn't, then you need to pick the Bristol Safer Schools option. This is the one with the Keeping Bristol Safe partnership logo. It's blue with a bridge on it. Step 3. Enter the code that corresponds to your phase. If you're an early years setting or a primary setting, your code is 3137. If you are a secondary setting or a post-16 setting, your code is 6676. Now, pause the video to give you time to download it. Mrs. Doyle from Father Ted encourages you to go on, and download it. Online safety. During the pandemic, the use of mobile and smart technology has increased exponentially. All of us have had to develop our skills to do things virtually. So Keeping Children Safe in Education 2021 has placed a greater emphasis on being technologically aware, as there is an expectation for you to identify, intervene in, and escalate any concerns where appropriate. Just a quick fire round. Discuss examples of actions you can take with children and young people about the following. Content. Being exposed to illegal, inappropriate, or harmful content. For example, pornography, fake news, racism, misogyny, self-harm, suicide, anti-Semitism, radicalization, and extremism. What do you currently do to protect from harmful content? Pause the video for a discussion. Contact. Being subjected to harmful online interaction with other users. For example, peer-to-peer pressure, commercial advertising, and adults posing as children or young adults with the intention to groom or exploit them for sexual, criminal, financial, or other purposes. What do you do to protect from harmful contact? Pause the video for a discussion. Conduct. This refers to the personal online behavior that increases the likelihood of or causes harm. For example, making or sending and receiving explicit images, consensual and non-consensual sharing of nudes and semi-nudes and/or pornography, sharing with others, explicit images, and online bullying. So what can we do to support young people to use mobile technology safely? Pause the video for a discussion. Finally, commerce. This is a new addition to the guidance and reflects concerns and risks in previous exercises such as freemiums and in-app purchases. Other risks can include online gambling, inappropriate advertising, phishing, or financial scams. What can we do to protect children and young people from commerce risks? Pause the video for a discussion. I just want you to think and reflect on how you talk about online safety with children and young people. Please watch a short video clip which is linked in the description. You can copy and paste the address into a new window. The video cannot be played on this video on copyright grounds. Stop playing the video at 4 minutes and 55 seconds and have a discussion around whether you'd have approached the situation differently. Safer working practice. In this section we will cover the following. A refresher of key points, what low-level concerns are and what to do when you have them, and self-care. This is a quick fire round. I'll give you 5 seconds between each question to shout out the answer. Can you beat the clock? Are you ready? We're going to start now. What document sets out the expectation for staff behaviour? The answer is the Staff Code of Conduct, otherwise known as the Staff Behaviour Policy. Who should you speak to if you have concerns about your head teacher or principal? You will need to speak to the Chair of Governors or equivalent, or if you're an academy, the Trust Executive Leadership, or if you're an independent school and the head teacher is also the proprietor, it will be the LADO. What does LADO stand for and who can contact them? LADO stands for Local Authority Designated Officer. They have the statutory role to investigate allegations made against or concerns raised in relation to professionals who work with children. Anyone can potentially make a referral, however, you should liaise with your head teacher or principal first, unless your concerns are about them. True or false? What happens at home stays at home. It won't affect my employment. The answer is false. You can still bring your profession into disrepute if you have something in your private life which may impact on your suitability to work in schools. Especially if there's a safeguarding concern at home, it may impact on your perceived appropriateness to work with children professionally. The best thing to do is to speak to your designated safeguarding lead if you're worried about something, who should offer you support in the first instance. True or false? Not reporting a concern can constitute as a conduct issue. The answer is true. If you don't share information about a practice concern, or whether you think a child has been harmed or likely to be harmed, you would be considered as being complicit with the concern or that you may have been neglectful in your duties. If in doubt, record and pass it on. Last question. True or false? Is it okay to share personal mobile numbers with pupils? The answer is false. This can be seen as you blurring your professional boundaries. If you have a different relationship with that pupil beyond your relationship as a member of staff, such as you being a neighbour, family, or family friend, then it is appropriate to disclose these to your senior leadership team. Talking about professional relationships, who is this person? Pause the video for a discussion. This is Thomas Hancock from Gloucestershire. He was jailed for 16 months at Bristol Crown Court this year. He also has received a 10-year sexual harm prevention order. The 29-year-old pleaded guilty to the following offences: sexual assault in a position of trust with a girl aged 13 to 17, causing a child to look at an image of sexual activity in a position of trust, and causing or inciting sexual activity in abusing a position of trust with a girl aged 13 to 17. Locally and nationally, there's been a real trend in professionals or members of staff starting relationships with either ex-pupils or pupils from another school who may be under the age of 18. There are a few concerns that you need to be mindful of if you come across these incidents. How do you know that members of staff weren't grooming the victims before they left the school? Testimonials from victims have acknowledged that there was chemistry or that they knew that there was a mutual attraction whilst they were attending the school as a pupil. If a child attends another setting, this doesn't justify their behaviour as a professional and falls far below the expectations around their duty of care. They will still be committing an offence against a minor and is likely to be demonstrating predatory or grooming behaviour towards children. Whilst there may be confusion of where the boundaries lie, the laws are clear. Regardless to the age of sexual consent being 16, teachers and other staff working in schools are in positions of trust. It is illegal and an offence for you to have sexual activity, even sexting, with someone under the age of 18. In some instances, this age gap isn't very much, but the law is clear. If you are concerned about someone you know, please raise this to your head teacher or principal. Low-level concerns. The phrase "there is no smoke without fire" comes to mind. Often with incidents of professionals posing a risk to children and young people, there have been telltale signs which may individually not have met a threshold to take action historically. Equally, please be aware that there are some colleagues who can make quite innocent mistakes, maybe due to their own vulnerability, naivety, or maybe a lack of experience, and will require support to nip concerns in the bud. Keeping Children Safe in Education 2021 is cracking down on this and requires action to be taken for even low-level concerns. So, what are low-level concerns? Activity that doesn't reach the ladder or harm threshold. This is where someone has behaved in a way which has harmed a child or may have harmed a child, or possibly committed a crime or criminal offence against or related to a child, where someone may have behaved towards a child or children in a way which indicates he or she may pose a risk of harm to them, or behaved in a way which may indicate they may not be suitable to work with children. Activity or behaviour which could cause unease or a nagging doubt. Maybe it's a gut feeling and you're having trouble articulating it. Maybe ask yourself the question, what could happen if no one takes action? Maybe the behaviour is inconsistent or breaks the code of conduct. Maybe behaviour blurs the professional boundaries, such as being overly friendly with children or having favourites. This is a bit of a no, but taking pictures of children on your mobile phones or personal devices. Engaging with a child in a secluded area or behind a closed door, such as an empty classroom, or covering up the panels within a door. Or using inappropriate or sexualized, intimidating, or offensive language. This is not an exhaustive list. Hopefully it gives you a flavour of what we're talking about. So, what should you do if you've got a low-level concern? Make sure you act. Action changes things, even if it's to alleviate the worry on your mind. Speak to the designated safeguarding lead, unless it's about the designated safeguarding lead, in which case you should alert the head teacher or principal. If the concern is about you, be honest and act with integrity. Reflect on practice. If possible, try and refer yourself if you're unsure or worried. An investigation may need to take place. Often this offers you some protection in itself. Investigations will take into account any support needs you may have. The designated safeguarding lead, head teacher or principal should act to support staff proportionately. This may reflect a deficit in policy and practice and may not reflect holistically on the individual concerned. For example, it may indicate that some additional training may be required. If you are worried that concerns are not being addressed nor action taken, and you're worried if you raise the concerns there will be repercussions, do consider using your whistleblowing procedures. If you don't feel comfortable using your settings own set of procedures, you can access the NSPCC whistleblowing hotline. We are nearly finished. This is the part about self-care. We have already used this phrase today in relation to learners, but how about we apply it to yourselves? Don't just survive, thrive. For happy, healthy learners, we need happy, healthy teachers and staff. This has been a tough couple of years with the pandemic. Now is not the time to start lifting your foot off the pedal on the self-care mobile. Check out the Happiness Pulse, provided by the Centre of Thriving Places, previously known as Happy City. It's a free online survey that takes about 5 minutes to complete. At the end, you'll get a score for 3 domains of well-being: be, do, and connect, and a general well-being score. You'll also get a link for some useful resources which can help you reflect on your happiness and well-being. The survey also contributes towards the measurement of happiness across the country, so if you don't do it for yourself, at least do it for your town, city, or local authority. Your answers are completely anonymous and they can't be used to identify you personally. We have now finished. Just a final thought for you to take away with you. This is a quote from Audre Lorde. Caring for myself is not self-indulgence. It is self-preservation, and that is an act of political warfare. I'm sure this will resonate with you differently, depending on who you are. Audre Lorde was an American writer, feminist, womanist, librarian, and civil rights activist. She was a self-prescribed black lesbian mother, warrior, poet who dedicated her life and her work to confronting and addressing injustices of racism, sexism, classism, capitalism, heterosexism, and homophobia. I'm sure some of you will empathise with some of these on a social justice level. However, there is one thing that will combine all of your experiences, which is working in education and working with children and young people. When working in a sector where we're expected to take care of others emotionally and physically, taking time, energy and resources for ourselves can feel shameful. Just remember how much you give to your job with all the sector cuts and ever shrinking resources. Remember why you wanted to work in your current role. After all, to misquote RuPaul, if you can't care for yourself, how in the hell are you going to care for someone else? Thank you for engaging. If you enjoyed the video, feel free to keep in touch with us and follow us on Twitter at @SetBristol. Don't let this training be a once-a-year event though. Designated safeguarding leads should be supporting you to develop your learning throughout the year, not just at the beginning of the academic year. During the pandemic, the Safeguarding and Education team have been working hard to bring you a website which will be your one-stop shop for safeguarding and education resources. This continues to be work in progress, and we would actively encourage you to step up and contribute where possible, sharing your resources, experiences, and good examples of work to develop a community of practice. After all, you're the ones doing the work on a day-to-day basis. Please consider bookmarking us at bristolsafeguardingandeducation.org. This website isn't just for designated safeguarding leads. If you scroll down on the homepage, you'll find some bespoke pages for all different roles and levels of responsibility. If you have any queries, please don't hesitate to contact us at safeguardinganeducationteam@bristol.gov.uk.